Nos protegen. Nos defienden. Nos ayudan en momentos de necesidad. Pero se les está destruyendo desde adentro.
Last year saw more Army suicides than any year on record.
Día
Our son was just one of thousands of veterans that this country has lost to suicide.
tras día,
only to die here at home in their sleep.
tras día.
He then used a pistol to take his own life.
Hay un enemigo oculto trabajando.
It's got to stop.
Y está oculto a plena vista. El enemigo más peligroso es aquel del que nunca sospechas. ...18 de junio de 1940... el psiquiatra y general de brigada J.R. Rees habló en la reunión anual del Consejo Nacional para la Higiene Mental con un plan estratégico para la psiquiatría.
We must aim to make it permeate every educational activity in our national life. Public life, politics, and industry should all of them be within our sphere of influence.
Pero para alcanzar sus objetivos, los psiquiatras necesitaban el campo de pruebas perfecto. Uno con un presupuesto ilimitado, que pudiera seguir creciendo.
It's all about money.
Billions of dollars.
It's our tax money.
Un campo de pruebas con un suministro interminable de recursos humanos.
More people than any other organization in America.
These troops are the guinea pigs.
They're being experimented on.
Un campo de pruebas donde cada orden se obedece, sin preguntas.
You have to obey those orders. You don't have an option.
I'm legally obligated.
Y un campo de pruebas donde un daño colateral se etiquetaría como confidencial.
This story has been censored every step of the way.
El brigadier general Rees sabía dónde buscar.
The Army and the other fighting services form rather unique experimental groups, since they are complete communities. And it is possible to arrange experiments in a way that would be very difficult in civilian life.
Fue una astuta táctica, sobre todo bajo el disfraz de la ayuda.
And now the soldier was sick, and unless we do something for him, he may remain sick for an indefinite period of time. Gentlemen, you are not requested to treat these patients. You are directed to do so.
Los psiquiatras habían llegado muy lejos. Hacía solo 20 años antes, prácticamente no se había oído hablar de ellos en la vida militar.
It wasn't until World War I that they came out of the asylums and sort of worked their way into the military. It was a very slow, very gradual insertion.
Lenta y gradual, porque simplemente no se podía confiar en los psiquiatras. Y por una buena razón. Sus tratamientos nunca se ha sabido que fueran científicos. De hecho, muchos de sus procedimientos experimentales se clasificarían luego como tortura.
One of the first uses of psychiatric treatment actually goes back to World War I when it was used on German soldiers who were deserting and trying to leave the front because of the horrors of the trench warfare on the Western Front.
A este tratamiento se le dio el nombre de cura de Kaufman, a partir de su inventor, pero muy pocos la habrían llamado terapéutica. Al soldado traumatizado se le conectaba una corriente eléctrica que se aumentaba hasta que no podía soportarlo más. En el proceso, el especialista le daba sugestiones hipnóticas.
Diese Kaufmann-Therapie wurde von den Psychiatern als Heiltherapie angewandt und eingeführt. Für die Soldaten war das alles andere als Heilung, weil es ja ein Schmerz war, der ihnen zugefügt wurde an den Gliedmaßen. Und so war wohl der wahre Grund, warum die Soldaten dann wieder an die Front gingen, nämlich, dass sie diese Schmerzen nicht mehr aushalten konnten und lieber sich in Kampfeinsatz wagten, als in der Klinik dauernd Schmerzen zu ertragen.
Pero el dolor que estos soldados sufrían no impidió a los psiquiatras seguir con su experimentación en la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Y lo mismo que antes, no estaba ideada para ayudar a sus pacientes a superar los traumas de guerra.
Zum einen war man von Seiten der Wehrmedizin im Zweiten Weltkrieg bestrebt, den Patienten noch schneller, als dies im Ersten Weltkrieg gelungen war, wieder an die Front zurückzuschicken. Das war der erste und sozusagen das entscheidende Ziel, das die Kriegspsychiatrie im Zweiten Weltkrieg hatte.
Por todo el mundo, los psiquiatras usaban la guerra como una oportunidad de poner a prueba algunos tratamientos muy peligrosos en soldados que tenían muy poco que decir sobre el asunto. Estaban dándoles electrochoques, poniendo a otros en coma profundo y llenando a más con poderosas drogas psicoactivas. Conforme seguían infiltrándose más y más, llegaron a participar activamente en el reclutamiento, el entrenamiento, la disciplina y la moral militar. Incluso daban sus opiniones sobre la selección de oficiales.
Then Poole is an odd sort of man. In civilian life he was very badly adjusted, in the personal sense that is, he just couldn't mix, couldn't make friends.
Para 1943, la psiquiatría había penetrado tan profundamente en el ejército americano que el psiquiatra principal de la Marina se jactaba así.
Psychiatry now has a place in every step of the Navy man's career, from his induction to his eventual separation from the service.
It is because of the military that psychiatrists, they became important. You know, they're wearing a uniform now, and they've got the epaulets, and, you know, they've got some power because of the military. The military gave them that.
El psiquiatra militar jefe de Estados Unidos, el general de brigada William Menninger, escribió un manual enumerando todos los problemas mentales que él pensaba que los soldados podrían tener. Pero no había análisis de sangre, ni radiografías, nada observado bajo un microscopio, solo opiniones. ¿Pruebas científicas? No, señor. Pero esto solo ayudó a la psiquiatría. Después de todo, el manual del ejército de Menninger proporcionaba una apariencia de legitimidad, algo que pudieran usar para diagnosticar y tratar todavía más integrantes de las Fuerzas Armadas. El manual del ejército se usaba tan ampliamente que acabaría convirtiéndose en la base de la Biblia psiquiátrica, el Manual Diagnóstico y Estadístico de los Trastornos Mentales, el DSM. Gracias a la influencia de gente como Menninger, para la mitad de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, los militares de todo el mundo aceptaban las afirmaciones de los psiquiatras de que ellos eran los expertos de la salud mental. Y gracias a eso, los psiquiatras quedaron libres para poner a prueba más drogas en muchos más soldados.
The drugs of choice are the barbiturates. You will note that in combat exhaustion, massive doses of these drugs are needed in therapy.
During the Second World War, both Americans and Germans experimented with stimulants because everybody thought, well, this is great, you know, it helps you focus, it keeps you awake.
Una de estas drogas era el Pervitin, que se les dio a los soldados alemanes para disminuir las inhibiciones y aumentar la agresividad.
Man kann sagen, dass dieser Feldzug durchaus Pervitin getränkt war, was die Wehrmachtssoldaten betrifft. Die Wehrmachtssoldaten waren für ihre Gegner unfassbar fit, sie waren unfassbar wach, sie hielten sehr, sehr lange durch, sie waren furchtlos, sie waren aggressiv und wirkten vor allem auf die Gegner wie aufgezogen.
Et il a fallu à peu près 18 mois pour que les accidents apparaissent en nombre considérable, c'est-à-dire des jeunes soldats qui brutalement se conduisaient comme des bêtes féroces, tiraient sur tout ce qui bougeait, sur les civils et sur leurs propres compatriotes. Et les accidents, les imprudences au pilotage d'avions, au pilotage de chars ont été tels que l'armée allemande a interdit l'utilisation de ces drogues à partir du milieu de l'année 42 ou 43. Et l'armée anglaise a vécu la même expérience.
Los japoneses también usaron estimulantes. Les dio a sus combatientes valentía instantánea, pero a un precio. El soldado de esta foto fue un piloto torpedo de la Segunda Guerra Mundial.
海軍の中の特攻隊員ということで、人間魚雷で有名な回転というものの搭乗員として訓練を受け、
La misión, introducirse en un torpedo que detonaría manualmente cuando estuviera cerca de un barco enemigo.
海軍の中ではね、とにかく先行艇部隊、先行艇による特攻を、とにかく成功させるためにということで、海軍ぐるみでっていうかね、でもってとにかく搭乗員たちにアンフェタミンを投与させて作戦行動を成功させるということがもう行われていたということですね。
Aunque sobrevivió a la guerra, la vida de este hombre estaba destrozada.
で実際に私の叔父も、帰ってきて、復員してきてからそういった形で今度メタンフェタミンヒロポン中毒になって、で今度ヒロポンが禁止されたわけですよね。今度は何になってか、もうアルコール、もう本当にアルコールはひどかったです。私も叔父が叔母にね本当に暴力を振るうシーンっていうのは何度も見てますし、だから彼自身も実際に、自殺を3度図って。
Desde la década de 1950 hasta los años 70, los psiquiatras en países como Inglaterra, Estados Unidos y la URSS continuaron usando a sus militares como campos de pruebas para un arsenal de nuevos tratamientos experimentales. Los psiquiatras militares de Estados Unidos usaron a los soldados para experimentar con LSD.
The squad, composed of volunteers for the test, responded like well-trained soldiers, immediately and without question. The squad, all except the drill sergeant, now drugged with LSD. After a few minutes, the men found it difficult to obey orders.
Aun cuando sabían de los peligros de esta droga, los psiquiatras ingleses continuaron haciendo pruebas con el LSD, esta vez con comandos de la infantería de marina.
Unknown to the troops, the drug was added to the water on the second day. At 11:40, the first effects of the drug make their appearance. The men no longer take cover, they relax and begin to giggle. 70 minutes after the administration of the drug, with one man climbing a tree, the troop commander gives up, saying, "I cannot do anything about this. I cannot control the men and I can take no action myself. I am wiped out as an attacking force."
Los psiquiatras soviéticos les dieron a sus soldados Dios sabe qué.
В советской армии я служил поваром, и обычно перед обедом приходил доктор, врач, и давал нам пакетик, чтобы мы сыпанули в борщ или там в кашу и размешали. Но мы обычно говорили, что это такое. Это нормально, это витамины. Но что это такое, я не знаю. Тем более, что мы, повара, обычно свою долю вынимали из котла до того, как приходил доктор.
A lo largo del tiempo, a los soldados se les han seguido dando drogas psiquiátricas para usos nunca estudiados ni aprobados. Ha sido un experimento colosal.
In the Falklands campaign, air crew were given uppers and downers so that their flight duty rotas could be maximized.
We've gotten reports that the Gulf War II pilots do take amphetamines, they do take dexedrine, and that at the nighttime they're given Ambien to bring them down so they can sleep. So they're continuously on this up and down kind of scenario.
Certainly in the Iraq, Afghanistan wars, psychiatry has played a huge role, huge.
La psiquiatría es ahora una sección aceptada de los militares por todo el mundo. Se nos dice que deberíamos confiar en los psiquiatras, que son las autoridades. Hay, sin embargo, un problema. Las cosas no han mejorado, solo han empeorado.
I spent almost 26 years on active duty in the Marine Corps. I retired with the grade of Brigadier General.
I was an Army captain in the aviation branch.
I was a Staff Sergeant E5 in the United States Air Force.
I was in the United States Marine Corps from 2007 to 2011.
Florida Army National Guard.
31st Engineering Battalion.
I was in aviation and military intelligence.
Battlefield intelligence analyst.
I was a U.S. Navy fighter pilot.
Combat medic with an LPN license.
So my nomenclature would be a 68 Whiskey Mike 6.
I got out as a sergeant, non-commissioned officer, this past March. I didn't see the emergence of psychiatry in the Army up until I suffered my own injury. And then it was like, it was a flood. It was a flood of doctors and it was a flood of meds.
Hay tanto estrés en el soldado de hoy como lo hubo en el pasado. Largas horas, misiones durísimas, periodos prolongados lejos de los seres queridos. Y cuando los problemas mentales y emocionales ocurren, no queda ninguna duda de su realidad. Pero sin importar a dónde vayan los soldados por ayuda, en el ejército de hoy en día, a menudo terminan en las manos de un psiquiatra.
You can go to a chaplain, and a chaplain is just somebody that you can talk to. But I think part of the issue is that a chaplain is kind of obligated to route you straight to a psychiatrist if you mention any key words, you know? Like, yeah, I have been stressed out or something like that.
If you tell a therapist you're depressed, they're going to send you to a psychiatrist. It's going to happen. It's just how it works.
So they'll make a real quick decision on you have a problem or what the problem might be within just minutes. So 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, if you're lucky, 45 minutes in the office.
La práctica estándar de un psiquiatra es diagnosticarte primero con un trastorno mental. Te podría decir que tienes un desequilibrio químico en el cerebro, aunque no haya hecho ningún análisis para demostrarlo. Y nunca lo hará, porque no existe ningún análisis. De hecho, no hay ningún análisis para ninguno de los cientos de trastornos mentales enumerados en el Manual de Diagnóstico de la Psiquiatría.
Psychiatry, especially, has no objective means of making any diagnosis. In general medicine, at least you have x-rays and blood tests to go on, and so that's the big dilemma faced by psychiatry. They have zero ability to diagnose, so they have zero ability to treat.
No physical abnormality has ever been found. So there is no physical abnormality to demonstrate by an MRI, a CT, an EEG. It's another fraud, pure and simple. It's another fraud.
Así que los psiquiatras están diagnosticándote enfermedades del cerebro, cosas físicas que están mal con tu cerebro, que ni siquiera pueden demostrar que existen.
There were no medical tests of any kind. There were no blood tests. Nothing that I could tell that was scientific in any way or medical in any way.
Somebody suggests that you have a disorder, a disease or something, there should be some sort of objective test. It's not unreasonable to ask for it. It's not unreasonable to insist on it.
Pero no obtendrás uno de los psiquiatras, solo sus opiniones. Y no tendrán miedo de dártelas.
There are troops that are seeing psychiatrists who are automatically, before they even open up their mouth, being diagnosed just because of the way how they look.
The psychiatrist told me that I would never amount to anything in the military again because of the emotional trauma I experienced and my current, at the time, my depression levels, my stress, my anxiety. I was never going to accomplish anything in the military. I would never be a good soldier again. And the only viable option that the military saw was to discharge me.
When a psychiatrist says your life is not worth anything because it's been all some sort of psychosis or some sort of trauma event, or you've got this disease or that, or some brain chemical or whatever, a soldier's life turns into nothing.
Cada año, a miles de hombres y mujeres uniformados se les diagnostica con una enfermedad mental, a veces 2 o 3. Esto ha llegado a estar tan fuera de control que el Pentágono gasta ahora $2,000 millones al año en salud mental únicamente. Y el presupuesto de salud mental de la Administración de Veteranos ha detonado, disparándose desde menos de $3,000 millones en el 2007 hasta casi $7,000 millones en el 2014. Es mucho dinero gastado en una profesión que ni siquiera puede producir pruebas para sus enfermedades cerebrales bajo un microscopio. No es que eso les importe a los psiquiatras. La diagnosis es solo un primer paso. De hecho, es una excusa para meterte a ti en algunos tratamientos muy peligrosos.
I joined the Navy when I was 17, and I retired. I was medically discharged, I should say, from the SEAL teams. I served my country with America's best in a time of war, and I had the honor of leading them. But I did lose, you know, my swim buddy, which is the guy you go through SEAL training with. And that gave me a survivor's guilt that I can't begin to describe. And, you know, I make it through combat in multiple firefights and nothing. I got blown up by an IED, it broke my neck, you know, and I didn't know it at the time. But I lived with that for like 5 years, make it through all of that. And I come back and they almost kill me with pills.
El resultado casi inevitable de un diagnóstico psiquiátrico es una receta de droga psiquiátrica. Los psiquiatras no hacen más que eso. Y han estado recetando mucho. Del 2005 al 2011, el Departamento de Defensa de Estados Unidos multiplicó por 7 sus recetas de drogas psiquiátricas. Eso es más de 30 veces más rápido que en la población civil. La campaña de drogas no es diferente para los veteranos.
We get this guy from the Veterans, I think the Veterans Administration or something like that. And he's basically telling you, if you are depressed, if you do something erratic, it's a disease. I mean, this guy's literally the loudest guy in the entire briefing. You know, very just in your face about it. And he's just basically saying, you know, if you're doing anything other than what you normally do, you have a disease and you need to be put on the system, you need drugs.
We can control it with medication. And then right after that, they're gonna get prescribed whatever drug the psychiatrist seems fit rather than just being able to talk to somebody.
No therapy, no lifestyle change. It's a straight line of how they educate these doctors in pharmacology, the symptom to a drug.
Los psiquiatras no tienen ninguna idea real de lo que sus drogas le están haciendo al cuerpo humano. Pero cuando se trata de repartirlas, eso apenas importa.
My older brother got out of the Marine Corps, like I said, about a year ago. And when he went to the VA hospital to make his disability claim and talked to him, he told him that he had trouble sleeping. And he didn't tell me what they gave him, but he basically said they gave him a big bag of happy pills.
So I came home on R&R from Iraq and got severely depressed. And they went and told me to go see the on-based psychologist, which then they prescribed me meds.
He basically told me what was wrong with me and prescribed me with Zoloft, and that was pretty much it.
I've been on Ambien, Seroquel, Paxil. That was one of the big ones. A very dangerous drug that I just think is very harmful, called Abilify. It kind of puts whatever meds you're on steroids.
Wellbutrin, Zoloft, modafinil, methylphenidate, trazodone, Prazosin, and Ambien.
Starts out with Dexedrine,
Vibrid,
Dalmane,
Citalopram,
Thorazine,
Citalopram,
Prozac, and effects are at the same time.
Stelazine,
Zoloft,
Compazine,
Seroquel,
Cogentin,
Abilify,
Nodular,
Wellbutrin,
IV Amitol,
Depakote,
Artane,
Xanax,
Haloperidol or Haldol,
Klonopin,
Diazepam,
Adderall, and Librium.
5 milligrams to 300.
300 milligrams.
1,200 milligrams of lithium a day.
Most individuals who would be given these drugs have no clue what the drug is, really, or what it can do to the mind, really. They just don't know. So it's a blind date. And and sometimes it turns out to be kind of an ugly one.
La medicación del ejército ha rebasado todos los límites, en especial en Estados Unidos. En total, en los últimos 10 años, el gobierno de Estados Unidos ha gastado más de $4.500 millones solo medicando a los soldados y a los veteranos. De hecho, en 2011, el Pentágono gastó más en pastillas, inyecciones y vacunas que en helicópteros Black Hawk, tanques Abrams, aviones de transporte Hércules C-130 y los misiles Patriot combinados.
The use of both psychiatry and psychotropic drugs has just ballooned in the U.S. military.
Every soldier that I've talked to, every time they've seen a psychiatrist, they would prescribe them some kind of psychotropic drug right off the bat.
I would say 60 to 70% of the soldiers we saw in our center were on medication.
Let me give you an example. I was on a committee, a scholarship committee for veterans at a college, and they invited the VA psychiatrist to come in to give a talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. But at the very end, I raised my hand, I said, how many of your veterans that you see do you medicate? And initially he tried to skirt the answer. He said, I see the most difficult. And I said, we all see the most difficult. How many do you medicate? 98%. It's criminal.
Y no es que esté mucho mejor en el resto del mundo.
I deal a lot with a lot of our soldiers within our NATO brothers and sisters. Canada, New Zealand, Australia, UK, Germany, France, Belgium, and even soldiers down in Italy and even in Spain. Each and every one of them have complained about the issues dealing with psychotropic drugs with them.
I was stationed in Germany for a while. I was in Kosovo for a while. And they had talked about that, yeah, when they see the psychiatrist, they do give them psychotropic drugs. So it seems like it's a worldwide problem.
A lot of our veterans have told us that when they went for help whilst they were still serving, they were then prescribed medication. It didn't help.
Quand on envoie un patient chez un psychiatre, il ressort directement avec des molécules chimiques. Et ça, on commence à avoir les effets secondaires et on commence à avoir les problèmes.
І справді, психіатри давали військовослужбовцям небезпечні наркотики, при цьому знаючи, що військовослужбовці мають в руках небезпечну зброю.
Och någonstans så finns det ju någon drivande orsak till att vi skriver ut mer och mer piller. Men vi får ju inte det förväntade resultatet.
Pero sin importar el país, esto es el ejército. Y en el ejército los soldados no tienen elección salvo seguir las órdenes.
When I'm wearing this uniform, if I'm ordered to see a psychiatrist, I have to go to see a psychiatrist. If I'm not in this uniform, I can tell them no.
The suggestion to go see the psychiatrist came across as a heavy recommendation. It wasn't a direct order, but it was, this is something you should go do. It's something that needs to be handled. You should go do this.
Y luego está la presión que te ponen para que tomes los fármacos.
I actually asked my commander that. I said, do I have to take these drugs if is this an order? And they all just stared at me, wouldn't give me a no or a yes, implied that I'm supposed to take this. If I would have refused, I probably would have lost my rank or lost opportunities in the military because I wasn't taking care of the property of the military, which was my body.
Most of the troops that I talked with did not want to take the psychiatric drugs, did not want them, did not need them, and rebelled at having to take them. But they were told that if you don't take these drugs, you can't get your compensation and you can't get any more VA treatment if you deny the drug usage. So they did.
I have heard that military personnel have been ordered to take these drugs. My response to that is, that's an illegal order, and I had that verified by a judge advocate general right here in Washington, D.C. It's illegal to demand that. If a psychologist tells you that you have to take it or you're going to lose your benefits, you need to report that psychologist to the proper authorities.
Oficialmente, 1 de cada 6 miembros del ejército está tomando una droga psiquiátrica como mínimo. Pero esto es lo importante. Según el Comité de Servicios Armados del Senado de Estados Unidos, nadie sabe cuántas drogas se distribuyen a los soldados. Ni siquiera hay un rastro de ello en papel. No hay receta, solo se distribuyen. El hecho es que la cantidad de gente que toma drogas psiquiátricas en el ejército es probablemente muchísimo más alta. En concreto, cuando tantos califican para la mayor combinación de diagnosis-medicación psiquiátrica de todas.
I was in the Army, and when I got out, I was corporal. And then I went back as a contractor for the Department of the Army. My original purpose was definitely get involved, serve my country, and then pursue it from that point forward. I personally had been deployed to Iraq for just about a year, and having gone back to Europe, I was having trouble sleeping, and having some issues just adjusting back to this, different lifestyle after having been shot at, nearly blown to pieces, so many times to this. Now I can just go down the road and get a pizza. And one of my officers recommended I go see a psychiatrist. Within 10 minutes it was, so you're probably bipolar, most likely ADD, and PTSD.
Los efectos visibles del estrés a causa del combate han sido mencionados por antiguos escritores como Homero y Heródoto. Los franceses le llamaban mal du pays, los alemanes Heimweh. En España era estar roto. Como fuera que lo llamaran, siglos de historia de militares han reconocido que algunas veces los horrores de la guerra pueden ser demasiada carga para los soldados. Solía considerarse una reacción nerviosa, algo esperado como parte del combate. Pero los psiquiatras hoy en día lo etiquetan como disfunción cerebral, lo que dio vida en 1980 al trastorno por estrés postraumático TEPT.
This war isn't any different than any other than guys coming back with shell shock, battle fatigue or combat fatigue, and now they're calling it post-traumatic stress disorder. It's been around forever.
Y como otros trastornos, no se descubrió con análisis científicos. Los psiquiatras presionaron para que se votara y se pusiera en el manual diagnóstico y estadístico de la psiquiatría. Literalmente, lo votaron. Hoy en día, es el diagnóstico más popular de la psiquiatría militar y se ha esparcido rápidamente dentro de la población civil.
The goal is to combat post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
Helping veterans with PTSD.
A soldier's post-traumatic stress disorder.
I was diagnosed with PTSD.
PTSD.
How many times do you hear PTSD in the media now? People really don't understand it, I don't think, and we're just trying to assign a label to people, our soldiers and sailors that are coming back from these very horrific events that they're being witness to.
People who suffer from post-traumatic stress are reacting to a traumatic event in a normal fashion. What we believe is that the military is treating veterans in particular with post-traumatic stress as though they have a mental illness. We don't believe they have a mental illness. We believe that they're wounded and what they need is healing.
In PTSD, psychiatry has created a disease. They speak of it as a disease just as they speak of generalized anxiety disorder and clinical depression as diseases, but none of them are actual diseases.
If someone shows up in my practice and they say a psychiatrist or other doctors diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder, I would actually ask the patient, okay, what tests were done to establish that diagnosis? And they'll think about it and they'll realize that nothing was done. They just got the opinion of whoever the practitioner was.
Certainly there is stress that goes along with combat. When you put a soldier into an environment where he's not getting sleep, he's being shot at, friends around him are getting hurt or dying, that's going to cause some bad side effects. Sure, those phenomena exist, but that doesn't then equate to, well, let's drug him.
No hay nada falso sobre los horrores del estrés del combate. Pero, ¿es eso suficiente para que la psiquiatría se invente una expresión de tono médico como disfunción cerebral para convencerte de que aceptes su tratamiento? Y entonces continúan expandiendo su definición más y más ampliamente.
What qualifies for PTSD has recently been downgraded, but they have directives that come out that say, well, now we're going to suggest that everybody who's, been in a war zone could possibly, maybe, and so with that, anybody qualifies.
What I saw with the new privates coming in is they were just out of basic training and they were given psych drugs for PTSD, for being in basic training for 9 weeks.
I was diagnosed with PTSD because I came back and I was a little jittery. And it's just, I guess they said that I had PTSD from that when it was just, I was still kind of trying to assimilate back into the scene of not being in combat, of not being over.
The determination that I had PTSD was almost made before I even walked into the office.
They told me that it was clear that I had post-traumatic stress disorder and that I needed medication to fix it.
Nearly every soldier in my company was diagnosed with PTSD. Nearly every soldier.
Hay 175 combinaciones distintas de síntomas que un psiquiatra puede usar para diagnosticarte con TEPT. No es sorpresa que el 37% de los recientes veteranos de guerra estén siendo tratados por ello. Una vez etiquetados, al 80% se les darán drogas psiquiátricas. Y de esos veteranos drogados, al 89% se les dan antidepresivos y al 34% poderosas drogas antipsicóticas. Incluso después de que uno de los psiquiatras más eminentes del TEPT hiciera un estudio admitiendo que los antipsicóticos no funcionan.
Just because a medication can be widely prescribed doesn't mean necessarily that it's really helpful overall for the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Si los psiquiatras se preocuparan de hacer análisis médicos estándar, cabría la posibilidad de que encontraran algo mal físicamente. Algo que etiquetaran como TEPT, pero sería daño físico cerebral real que se podría verificar con una escanografía cerebral. Se le llama lesión cerebral traumática o LCT. Y se calcula que 320,000 soldados la han sufrido.
Traumatic brain injury is an injury to the brain itself, either caused by a concussive blast or a closed head wound. There's some difficulty determining between traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress because the symptoms tend to mirror each other. Inability to focus, short-term memory loss, difficulty with rage or anger.
You're talking about a physical injury, an actual brain injury, as opposed to a mental health, a condition. You know, the two absolutely, totally separate things.
I'm handling a Gulf vet who's got traumatic brain injuries. He's labelled with PTSD, and he's got a lump of shrapnel in his head. You know? So, hang on, you don't get lumps of shrapnel flying into your head and embedding in your skull do not leave you with no effect on the brain. The brain's going to take a real hammering from that sort of thing.
Por supuesto, la mayoría de los psiquiatras no van a detectar el ST porque no verifican para buscarlo. En vez de eso, mientras el problema real aumenta, lo enmascaran con medicación. Y las cosas pueden ponerse mucho, mucho peor.
I think my main goal why I joined the military was, the first thing is to get money for college. And then all my friends were going in and they were having a blast with it, and I just really wanted to do something with my life and not just stay here in a small town and not do anything. I served in 2 branches of the military. I served in the Marine Corps and also the Army, and got out as a specialist also at 84. When I was in the Marine Corps, I never went and saw a psychologist, but when I was in the Army, they told me I had to go see one. At that point, he diagnosed me with PTSD and prescribed me Prozac and Wellbutrin in Iraq, still carrying a weapon, still in the combat zone. The psychologist said that my anxiety and depression, everything, like stuff like that, should actually go away. And actually it did not, it got worse.
La vida de un soldado es exigente. Se te entrena para estar alerta, decisivo y concentrado, y en una forma física y mental excelente. Es una necesidad. Pero las drogas psiquiátricas pueden hacerte ineficaz para el combate. Los psiquiatras saben esto, pero aún así afirman que son terapéuticas. Esta es la realidad.
All psychiatric meds are mind-altering drugs. People don't put that together, but they're mind-altering, and they have side effects, disaster side effects.
One of the most significant problems about every psychotropic drug that I can think of, the stimulants, the tranquilizers, antipsychotics, mood modulators, are unpredictable. I can give the same drug to 20 different men, and they'll have 10 different reactions to it.
Nadie, ni siquiera quien la receta, sabe lo que te va a pasar con una droga psiquiátrica. Cada una es diferente y cada una tiene una larga lista de efectos secundarios en letra pequeña en el encarte del paquete.
My friends that take the drugs that I'm prescribed have very bad balance, a terrible memory. They have difficult talking clearly, speaking clearly to each other.
Their reaction times are very slow, and they have a hard time concentrating.
It pretty much just erased all feelings that I had. So I was just there.
A lack of motivation, really. I just stopped caring.
I was constantly demotivated, very worn down all the time. I was constantly sleepy, like not tired, just sleepy. I could stop doing something and instantly fall asleep.
1 minute you can be on patrol, next minute you'd be asleep. That's what those pills do to you. They make you tired.
I would get headaches, but it's not like a normal headache. It would be like sharp pains just zapping through my head.
My anxiety level was through the roof. I had heart problems. I put on 20 to 25 kilos of extra weight.
I probably gained 40 pounds over the course of that period of time.
I was up to almost 300 pounds. I was in metabolic syndrome. My body my adrenal system had completely shut down. My muscles had seemingly turned to water, and I could not lose weight for anything.
I can't ever think of anybody who's ever said, I feel better. This has helped me. I can't honestly think of anybody who's ever said that to me. And I've seen and talked to a lot of veterans in my time.
These are supposed to be the finest, most elite soldiers, physical combat machines, and they're being given something that's harming them, that's destroying not only their body physically, but also their minds mentally.
Los psiquiatras te dirán que los beneficios de sus drogas exceden los riesgos. Esto es basura y es falso científicamente. Ha habido amplios estudios que demuestran que las drogas psiquiátricas como los antidepresivos no funcionan mejor que una pastilla de azúcar. Pero algunos de los efectos secundarios de la droga no solo son dañinos, son letales. Además de los terribles efectos secundarios que causan las drogas psiquiátricas, está lo más extraño de todo. No curan nada. Así que, ¿qué es lo que hacen? Alteran tu comportamiento al insensibilizar tus sentidos. Esto no solo impide que la persona resuelva situaciones, sino que la entumece al mundo que la rodea. Hay incluso un nombre para ello: despersonalización.
I've had patients who've been given very large doses of psychoactive drugs over a period of about a year, and basically destroyed their sense of self.
They don't care almost about anything. You could go up to someone and start yelling at them, and if they're on the large enough cocktail, they won't do anything. They become almost drones.
So they're literally lobotomizing our soldiers with these drugs. I'm sorry. I'm just being very direct and honest with my experience of over 200 injured warriors. It's almost like being in a mental hospital with lobotomized patients. I'm sorry. It's just awful.
Y la despersonalización se pone realmente peligrosa cuando la droga crea otro efecto secundario común.
If someone is numbed like that, they're less likely to be concerned about their consequences of their behavior and might resort then to impulsive actions, violent actions.
Some of the effects of the drugs that we're aware of, that the veterans we've dealt with have come across, have been things like more anxiety, more anger.
They're having all these fits of anger, aggression, they're getting in fights with their significant other.
And of course, what this has led to is just a really horrendous number of domestic shootings, domestic beatings, child, wife abuse.
Las cifras confirman esto. Desde el 2006, crímenes sexuales violentos y el maltrato doméstico en el Ejército han aumentado más de un 30%, y el maltrato infantil en un 43%, todo mientras el drogado psiquiátrico de nuestros soldados ha superado todos los límites. Y luego, están los casos donde un soldado bajo la influencia de las drogas psiquiátricas pierde la cabeza.
This one particular morning, the soldier was in our unit, and most of the soldiers in our unit are on some type of medication. And she was waiting for the soldier. And when she walked in, he was locking and loading his weapon. And she asked him, "What are you doing?" And he looked at her, he said, "I don't know." And she said, "You were locking and loading," which means he's putting his ammo in his weapon. And she asked him, she said, "What were you gonna do?" He said, "I don't know if I was just gonna shoot myself or shoot up everybody in this building, and then myself." And we were there.
11 de mayo de 2009. El sargento John Russell abre fuego en una clínica de campaña en Bagdad. Mata a 2 oficiales y 3 reclutas. El día anterior, su psiquiatra le había recetado antidepresivos. 11 de marzo de 2012. En una aldea remota en Afganistán, el sargento Robert Bales mata a 16. 9 eran niños. Antes de su matanza indiscriminada, Bales había esnifado la droga psiquiátrica Valium y había bebido alcohol. 16 de septiembre de 2013. El veterano de la Marina, Aaron Alexis, lleva un fusil al arsenal naval en Washington, D.C., donde mata a 12 personas a sangre fría. De acuerdo a los informes, a Alexis se le había recetado el antidepresivo trazodone.
He talked about it. He said he went to the VA and they would give him some medicine.
Estos son algunos de los muchos en manos de los profesionales de la salud mental, justo antes de cometer horrorosos actos de violencia. El soldado de primera David Lawrence, quien mató a un jefe talibán en su celda cuando había tomado Zoloft y trazodone. Terrence Tyler, un ex marín que abatió a tiros a 2 compañeros de trabajo y luego a sí mismo en un supermercado de Nueva Jersey. Se le había diagnosticado depresión grave y tomaba Prozac. Y Eddie Ray Rove, quien mató a un miembro de comando de élite condecorado. Acababa de salir de un hospital psiquiátrico 4 días antes, donde recibió tratamiento para el TPT.
Drugs and weapons do not mix. Okay, it's a recipe for disaster all by itself.
They're seeing things different. Their mind has been altered. Their brain has been altered. Their judgment and reasoning is not what it would have been without these medications.
It's the mind that makes the decision of when to shoot and what to shoot. It's the mind. If you alter the mind and you imbalance the mind, which is what psychiatric drugs do, you change the results of who or what gets shot on the battlefield or at home after the battle is over.
Las drogas psiquiátricas no solo causan violencia en los soldados, provocan a la gente de todos los ámbitos sociales a cometer tiroteos masivos mortales en nuestros hogares, lugares de trabajo y escuelas. Y luego está la cuestión de qué podrían causarse a sí mismos.
Ever since I was a little kid, I always loved the military. I loved the Army, and I think I always knew that I wanted to, join. I just said, I wanted to go and experience it, and just to serve my country. And then I went to the recruiter station. I said I want to jump out of airplanes and ride motorcycles. And right then they said, "We got a job for you," But I did it, and it was good. It was right after combat. So, you know, I started getting these dreams and flashbacks and all that stuff, and then, you know, kind of like big anxiety and all that stuff. And I went to my doc, and they said, yeah, we got to get you some meds, you know, and they gave me them, and, you know, that was it. You first start taking it, you feel great. Whoa. And then it just like, it's like you get immune to it, and then, oh, let's take a higher dose. Let's take a higher dose.
In my experience, I didn't see anything helping at all. I felt like it was making everything worse.
I gained like, how many, like 40 pounds taking the meds. We looked it up, and that one med, I don't remember what it was called, but it said it acted like you had like 1,500 calories every pill you took, and I had to take it 3 times a day.
If he missed a dose, then the whole family would know, the whole house would be kind of on edge because you couldn't talk to him. He would snap.
You take your meds and you can just start feeling it going down, and then you're just like, bam, and you're a zombie, you know?
It almost seemed like he just didn't care about life anymore. He wasn't himself.
My body was breaking down, and my wife, she's all into herbs, and she's saying this isn't right. And then one I was all fucking drunk, and you know, the meds, just taking that shit, and I just said, fuck it, I'm done. And I took my pistol and fucking put it in my mouth, and she opened up the door. I fucking took it, and I said, I was like, fucking, I said, we gotta fucking do something, you know? And this shit just didn't work, you know? And
I had to literally grab the weapon away from him because it probably would have happened.
So I said, fuck it, I'm stopping. You know, I'm stopping taking all this shit, it's killing me. You know, it's gonna kill me, it's gonna kill my wife, you know?
That was the straw that broke the camel's back. It wasn't working, and something had to be done. I didn't want to lose my husband. I didn't want him to kill himself, and I didn't want to be killed as well in the process.
I knew I wasn't me, you know? It was the drug that was doing it, and I knew I had to change or I'd be dead. And that's why I changed it.
Hay un enorme problema con los suicidios en el ejército. Desde el 2002, el índice en las filas de los Estados Unidos casi se ha duplicado.
The suicide rate has really been going out the roof here lately with our military members, both while they're still in and once they return back to the States.
I would move from base to base to base, and I'd be on different missions at different times. And one minute I'm on a base and I'm having lunch, and I'm being asked, hey, did you hear about those 3 guys, those 3 soldiers who committed suicide?
It was a black eye on Fort Bliss. Soldiers were dying left and right. Preventable deaths, we're talking suicides, we're talking about these soldiers getting in their cars going, or motorcycles going 150 miles an hour and, you know, hitting a median, family violence. It really spiraled out of control.
Mientras sucede todo esto, los psiquiatras siguen dando drogas psiquiátricas en volumen, drogas que es bien sabido que aumentan la violencia y los pensamientos suicidas.
My psychiatrist at the time had issued me a recommended gabapentin, and I took one, and I think within 30 minutes I had thoughts of suicide.
They started me on a really low dose to build it in my system, but even the low dose, I was still feeling side effects of suicide, depression, anxiety.
I did notice that there was a lot of times that I thought, you know, that it would just be better to be dead than to keep living like that. And I look back on it now and I do realize that it was the meds.
Sí, puede haber razones para el suicidio en el ejército hoy que no tienen que ver con las drogas psiquiátricas. Pero sería estúpido ignorar la influencia de las drogas. Solo pregúntenselo a los soldados sobre el terreno.
I was military police, actively working as a police officer on the military installation. And in 1 week, I went to about 8 or 9 suicide attempts where the person either overdosed or, said that he was gonna kill himself, something like that. And 1 for 1, every single person was on psychiatric drugs.
Because of my role as a criminal investigator, I didn't witness the soldiers while they were taking psychiatric drugs. All I got to see was after the suicide or after the death, and then the reports come out. We'd get called pretty often to investigate. We would have an autopsy performed and would include a toxicological exam, which would determine any drugs in the system, and usually there was some type of drug. A lot of them were taking some sort of medication for depression or anxiety. There were a lot of suicides happening in the military, overseas, in theater, and back in the States.
De 2009 a 2012, más soldados en Estados Unidos murieron por suicidio que por accidentes de tráfico, enfermedades cardíacas, cáncer y homicidio. El secretario de Defensa de Estados Unidos lo calificó de epidemia. Y sí, es un problema. Algunos dicen que es el estrés de la guerra, pero el 85% de los suicidas ni siquiera estuvo en el frente de combate, y un 52% nunca fue movilizado. Mientras tanto, la eficacia de los psiquiatras militares nunca se cuestiona, y da como resultado intentos de suicidio como este.
My son joined the Army. He wanted to make a career and become something. He was still sweet and more normal when he came back from Iraq, even though he had, nervousness in crowds and PTSD. He was not different in personality as far as, to that degree like what we saw later on the drugs.
And so when Michael said, hey, I'm having anxiety issues, I said, you need to go tell them. Well, and that's what really began his journey. That was the worst step, in my opinion, that we could have ever done. It started off with 1 drug and went to 2. With each successive symptom that he got a new drug.
And we noticed that he started to go down in personality. It wasn't our son anymore. It was, anger, slurred speech.
It was surreal because the person I was talking to wasn't even my son. He was unsure of himself. He didn't have any will to do anything. At one point, he had stopped brushing his teeth, drinking water, eating, because he didn't care. He didn't even know that he was that way.
And I researched and discovered that our soldiers were being medicated and that they were committing suicide from it. So I printed all my research out and I handed it to my husband. And I said to my husband, tell me what you think of all this research. And he came back to me and said, if my calculations are correct, there's a pattern here that matches our son's behavior. And if my calculations are correct, he's just about ready to commit suicide. I was in the dollar store and he called me and said, I don't want to upset you, but I want you to know Michael's okay, but he tried to kill himself. And he put 2 IVs in his arms and he bled out in the bathtub and he was drawing in his blood on the walls. He didn't even know he was committing suicide.
So his cognizance, his reason, was already usurped by these pills. They take away who you are. And he wasn't the same.
We had the hospital check him and they found at least 9 drugs in his system. And they're just the ones they tested for.
They were giving my son drugs that had black box warnings, said, if you're under 25 and you're taking this pill, your risk of suicide is going up 50%. Risk of suicide. But they were still giving him the pills.
What he went through was so horrific, it's hard for him to talk about. But he allows us to speak because he wants to save his comrades. He wants to save others who are going through the same thing, who are being drugged with lethal cocktails.
Me speaking as Michael, knowing the things that he has said to others, he would say, stay away from the pills. It's a dead end.
Los psiquiatras dicen que sus drogas salvan vidas, pero raras veces hablan de los graves riesgos de suicidio. ¿Por qué no lo hacen? Porque esas advertencias en recuadros negros para jóvenes de 18 a 24 años. Esa es la edad promedio de casi la mitad de los soldados americanos movilizados. Y aún así, el uso de drogas psiquiátricas en el Ejército de Estados Unidos ha subido un 76% desde el 2001. Esto incluye antidepresivos que los psiquiatras les dan a los soldados para prevenir el suicidio.
There's no evidence that drugging stops suicide. The reason I'm saying this is because it is alleged that if somebody is suicidal, you should medicate them. Except there's no evidence that medicating somebody who's suicidal is going to prevent suicide. There's substantial evidence that many drugs actually promote suicide.
And last year, within the DoD, there were 349 suicides among military personnel. That's almost one a day, literally one a day.
Más suicidios que muertes en combate. Y el ejército está muy preocupado.
In fact, in 2009, Fort Campbell, Kentucky was actually closed down by the base commander for a time because they were having just an inordinate number of suicides.
Suicides on Fort Campbell have to stop now.
The last I heard, the VA was getting close to 450 calls a day to their suicide hotline, which they set up years ago to handle the amount of veterans that have suicidal thoughts on a daily basis. 450 calls a day.
Es un problema que ha resonado en las salas del gobierno.
One of the biggest concerns I have about the military is the inordinate number of suicides that have taken place among active duty and those who've left the military.
3 years ago, I got Congress to hold hearings to examine the relationship between suicide and increased use of medications, and there was a direct parallel. The amount of suicides were increasing proportionate to the amount of medications being introduced.
So, do antidepressants cause suicide? Of course they do.
So, don't blame the soldiers. Don't blame the military as a whole. Blame the corruption of the military by the psychiatric industry that is peddling false, dangerous medicine, that is peddling a kind of modern-day quackery, calling it treatment, but delivering suicide.
Y mal como está dentro del servicio activo, los veteranos la tienen mucho peor. Se están suicidando en un promedio de 22 al día, uno cada 65 minutos. ¿Pero consideran los psiquiatras detener alguna vez el drogado con fármacos? No. En vez de eso, es un asalto total.
I was a very highly functioning non-commissioned officer. I was a platoon sergeant at the time. I was kind of always being groomed for that next rank. I was getting sent to the right schools, had the support of my chain of command. Things were going really good. After I witnessed this traumatic event on my last deployment in Iraq, that's when the medications really started coming. I mean, full force. And like I said before, before I knew it, I was on 9 to 12 different kind of medications. And when I was going through the separation process in the Army, I had to get some physicals and evaluations from outside people. These professionals would see my records come up on the screen and the amount of medications that I was put on throughout my time in the Army, but especially the last couple of years, and they would literally gasp. And they were shocked at the amount of drugs, the high doses of these drugs. It was like a 6-page rap sheet.
Con todas las formas en las que las drogas psiquiátricas pueden reaccionar en tu cuerpo, ¿cómo contrarrestan los psiquiatras un efecto secundario de las drogas que te dan? No te quitan la droga. O bien te aumentan la dosis, que puede causar más efectos secundarios, o te añaden otra droga que añadirá aún más, luego otra y otra.
It was clear right away that they really had no idea what anything that they were giving me was really going to do. They said, this drug may not work. You may need a different one. This one may need a higher dose. This one may need a lower dose.
There was friends of mine that I saw had 2, 3, 4 pills that they had to take daily.
You'd find soldiers that are on dozens of medications. And when I say, 7 to 9 drugs at one point, I'd say that was very average. I've heard as high as 14.
I know of some troops, personally, who were given up to 20 different drugs.
It's kind of depressing if you look at the number of medications that I've been on. It's very thick. It makes up a large portion of my medical file with the Veterans Administration.
And a lot of people were on not only psychiatric drugs, but drugs for their injuries. And the combination made them different. They weren't the same people.
They're mixing amphetamines with painkillers and antidepressants and sleeping pills. I mean, even to the unlearned, that sounds insane.
Esto es tan común que hasta tienen un nombre para ello: polifarmacia. Y aquí está este hecho poco conocido. Muchas de estas drogas nunca han recibido pruebas combinadas, lo que convierte a quienes están tomando estas drogas en conejillos de indias.
The danger escalates with every increase in dose and every increase in the number of medications.
I have watched my clients who have been prescribed psychotropic drugs, sometimes a cocktail, often a cocktail, sometimes a single drug, and they are grievously changed.
If they were experiencing an adverse effect, how would they know which drug it was? Was it the antipsychotic? Who knows? Was it the antidepressant? Was it a combination? These guys don't know. All they know is they're supposed to take these because their doctor said they'll be better. And in fact, they only got worse.
And the problem is that there's no attention to the detail of what happens to these troops that are placed on them. There's no follow-up. They're simply placed on them, given a great big huge supply of them, and they're sent out to fight.
De hecho, a algunos soldados americanos se les da un suministro de drogas psiquiátricas para 180 días cuando salen al frente. Sin supervisión, sin restricciones. Se las toman cuando quieren.
And what happens to it when they go into combat? Are they sharing with their friends? Sure they are. That's why I've been told by social workers, corpsmen, medics, that 90% of the troops in combat have at one time or other taken some type of psychiatric medication.
It's just a grand, crazy, insane pharmaceutical roulette that's being conducted at the expense of our nation's sons and daughters, really.
My husband never did drugs, nothing, never did anything. And I dated him 5 years before I married him. And he never did anything like that. And then when he was in Afghanistan, the psychiatrist over there started giving him the medications for depression and, of course, the pain that he was in because he had been hit. And the first time he got hit, they just started drugging him up. And the second time he was hit is when they sent him home to me. And 2 weeks after him being home, the violence was so incredible. I told him that we needed counseling or we just needed to get a divorce because I couldn't live in the abuse that I had just gone through because my husband never treated me that way. Needless to say, at that point, I didn't realize that these drugs were affecting him. At one point in time, my husband was on 21 drugs, 21 at one time. I mean, and it was craziness. This is not, I don't even know who this person is that I lived with. I've tried to get him help right from the beginning with the drugs, and they're refusing him any help. They just keep continuing to give him the drugs, and he's not getting any treatment. His physical needs are not being met, and he's continuing to deteriorate on a daily basis. The whites of his eyes are now yellow. They have a yellow tint to them. His skin color is green and gray, and this happens often. And we do have the fear that we will wake up in the morning and he's going to die. Every day we live that every day. His daughter lives that every day. I live that every day. Is today the day that he's going to die? Is today the day I'm going to get the call? They need to give me my husband's life back, is what they need to do. They need to take him off the drugs so that he can think. He can't think. He doesn't know.
La horrible realidad es que una vez que tomas drogas, salir de ellas es un infierno. Puedes caer en la adicción a algunas de ellas en solo 2 semanas.
Now we have soldiers coming back from the battlefield and they're addicted to psychotropic medications and they have a detox reaction back in civilian life and they begin to exhibit the side effects for which they were being pre-medicated. So they become depressed, they become suicidal.
Not only is it dangerous to be on these drugs, it's also very dangerous to come off of them. In fact, in many cases, the suicides happen immediately after someone stops taking an antidepressant drug. So if you do that, make sure you do it in a way where you have medical supervision and you have a support system in place so you can get off of those drugs safely.
Intentar dejar la medicación psiquiátrica por ti mismo, en especial de golpe, es muy peligroso, por los terribles efectos que podrías experimentar.
I have anxiety, I'm perspiring, I just don't know what to do.
Los psiquiatras te dirán que es la recaída a tu enfermedad mental y que necesitas volver a tomar tus drogas. Eso no es cierto. Esto es el síndrome de la retirada, igual que con las drogas callejeras.
The doctor did not tell me if I did come straight off of these that there would be a worse effect. I didn't know that. So when I did come off it, I fell harder.
These are actually addictive drugs, you know, and I didn't know how to act without them.
The withdrawal process is rough. And one of the things that I experienced is all these emotions, all these feelings, all these trauma, all this sadness that wasn't being dealt with, wasn't being cared for. It was just being medicated. When I got off all those drugs, it was like a floodgate.
Even though you come off those pills, there's a period of time for, I think, a long, long time that stuff is coming out of your system. You know, and sometimes you think that life would be better if you were dead.
Es alucinante ver cuántos soldados vuelven a casa adictos a las drogas psiquiátricas. Una investigación en el Ejército de Estados Unidos descubrió que cerca del 35% de los soldados de la Unidad de Transición de Soldados tienen un problema con las drogas recetadas. Y muy a menudo, la adicción no es temporal, sino para el resto de una vida. Pero puede ser todavía peor que eso. Porque a veces estas drogas se pueden volver letales, golpeando con rapidez y sin avisar.
Gunnery Sergeant Chris Bacchus survived the assault on Baghdad, a deployment to Afghanistan, and a second tour in Iraq.
What specifically killed your brother?
He died because he mixed narcotic drugs. Whenever he had an issue with them, they would increase either the dosage or the potency of the individual pill.
A bomb couldn't kill this Marine, but a bottle did.
Chris Bacchus tenía 2 antidepresivos, 2 opiáceos y un ansiolítico, Ativan, en su organismo. Un total de 27 medicinas diferentes en el escenario, la mayoría recién recetadas. La autopsia mostró que la interacción de drogas lo mató. Cualquier doctor que se precie pudo haber predicho eso. El caso de Chris Backus resultaría no ser distinto de centenares de otros. Solo a 450 millas, Stan y Shirley White celebraban el retorno sano y salvo de su hijo, el cabo de los marines de 23 años, Andrew White, de la zona de combate. Pocos sabían lo que le pasaría cuando fue a buscar ayuda al hospital local de veteranos, solo diagnosticarlo y luego drogarlo.
Andrew's behavior really started to deteriorate. We saw more and more withdrawal. We saw anger issues. At one point, he slept for 2 or 3 days at a time.
The psychiatrist, their solution to his deteriorating condition was to increase his medications or to change the medications.
El 12 de febrero del 2008, el cabo White murió mientras dormía. Ni siquiera se movió, sencillamente murió.
The coroner's report said it was a intoxication of these drugs. Did not mention, but his heart stopped beating.
Andrew being 23, being very healthy, not having any major issues, you shouldn't die in bed.
Era uno de 4 veteranos, solo 20añeros, encontrados muertos en sus camas en Virginia Occidental, con solo meses de diferencia entre sí. Esto llevó a la tenaz investigación de un neurólogo de San Diego para descubrir la causa.
I tried to understand how they could have died, what the mode, the mechanism of death could have been. And these dead in an undisturbed bed were cardiac. Suddenly the heart stops for some reason.
Siguiendo cada pista, vio que cada uno había sido diagnosticado con TEPT y que cada uno había estado tomando el mismo potente cóctel de drogas psiquiátricas.
Came across literature on the antipsychotics, and they said that the antipsychotics have a particular danger. They can stop the heart suddenly. And here these veterans, all 3 were on a combination of drugs which can cause or lead to sudden cardiac death. Might this not be the tip of an iceberg? Might there be others? And to make a long story short, that list grew to 250, 300, and today it is 351 probable cardiac deaths. The risk of sudden cardiac death makes those drugs truly unfit for human consumption, and yet they're being used like jelly beans in the military.
Yeah, we're watching me here, Devil Dog.
Otra de esas muertes cardíacas fue el cabo de 21 años, Chad Ollich-Leger.
Are you getting that? It's machine gun fire. We don't know where it's coming from. But no worries. We have our sandbag structures. Carry on.
Chad was hilarious. You know, super smart. Super smart.
He was a lot of fun. You know, he played sports, you know, all of that, like any normal kid was, outdoors all the time.
He was willing to make friends and talk to everybody. So that's kind of, you know, what caught my eye in the beginning as well. So he was just fun to be around.
This Native American has no comment.
Well, he told me the reason why he wanted to join the military was that if he went, then maybe his children wouldn't have to go.
He really felt like it was his duty as a citizen to participate.
When he came back, we realized he was different. He had asked his commander that, you know, he wanted to seek counseling. He needed some help because he was having problems dealing with what he had done over there and what he saw on that first tour.
All right, the reason I'm down here and not up there is because as soon as the IED went off, we were talking about a possible trigger man. We don't know where they are because we never know where they are.
Just all kind of saw like, okay, they're gonna give you some medication. You're gonna, you know, see a psychiatrist for a little bit, talk it out, things will get better. We were so naive.
When he was on the drugs, he seemed like he was just doped up, all the time. He was disoriented.
It literally turned him into a walking zombie. I mean, after he would take that, and and he was real adamant about making sure he took his medication on time.
It just felt like the medication made him forget what he was doing, made him forget some things that had happened in the past. We'd be talking about stories and he wouldn't believe what I was telling him.
And he'd take Seroquel and then 10 minutes later be going back to his pill bottle and say, well, I gotta take my medication. And it's like, you just took it.
He wasn't in control, I felt like, in the end. He just really didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't going to work when he was supposed to. He said he would just sleep in his room.
We're gonna pause for a second due to malfunctions and technical difficulties.
I got the knock on the door at 11 o'clock at night. But when I heard the knock on the door, I knew what it was.
They had found Chad. And my thought was, okay, great, where is he? Where's his little shit? I hadn't heard from him. And he said that he was at the barracks. I said, okay, is something wrong? Can I go see him? And he said that they found him in his room, that he was dead on the floor. They didn't know how long he'd been there, that he was already gone, and I couldn't see him. I couldn't even get on base. All I could think of was that he was alone in that room by himself, that he was supposed to be safe.
It was harder for us because we always expected, if he's in the military, he's in the Marines, we kind of expected that if he were to die, he was going to die when he was out on deployment. He was going to die, killed in action, something. We didn't expect him to come home and die.
I had a doctor at Texas A&M University read the autopsy and then said that the levels of the meds in there were not excessive. They were in line with what was prescribed.
Nothing was out of range of dosage, but they looked at it and they said, how come he's taking, 7 of them? It's a lot. And the doctor looked right at me and said, they killed him.
I blame the psychiatrists and I blame the doctors for prescribing those pills. Those are the ones that never checked up on him and let him walk out with all the other pills, didn't take any of the pills away, just kept giving him more pills. And they're the ones.
Good morning, and hoorah.
Los psiquiatras llaman a esas muertes accidentes por sobredosis, pero encarémoslo, esto raya en homicidio por negligencia. Y mientras nuestros soldados sucumben uno a uno con los niveles recetados de estos cócteles letales, te tienes que preguntar si los psiquiatras se preocupan siquiera de encontrar la razón. Es suficiente saber que los soldados están muriendo, pero este consumo de drogas va más allá de la víctima. También puede afectar las vidas de sus seres más queridos.
I was with the 101st Airborne Division. I was assigned to them doing gun truck and convoy security, Operation Iraqi Freedom. I came out as a captain. I've got a total of 26 months in combat. When I came out, returned home from Operation Iraqi Freedom, anyone that marked that they had seen combat or had seen someone killed or had participated in combat operations directly, it was mandatory that you went to mental health. I myself was prescribed Prozac, Depakote, and at one time Zoloft. One night, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. One night I had laid down and I'd taken my pills, and I took a shot of Jack Daniels. At that time I had my children staying with me, so I didn't get drunk or anything like that, didn't drink overly heavy, and for some reason I decided to sleep on the couch this time. And I can remember opening my eyes and not being able to move my arms and my legs, and literally feeling like I was choking to death. And my son, who was 13 at the time, He came in, obviously I was making some noises, and he shook me so hard that I fell off of the couch. And that kind of woke me up. But literally I felt like I was dying. And I can't help to think if my son wasn't there to wake me up, would I have been a statistic? Maybe.
En servicio activo o como veterano, un soldado en drogas puede afectar negativamente a toda su familia.
What we're seeing is that now this label of being broken and disordered is not only being utilized with our troops, but it's now also extended with their families.
You hear stories about these young children that are living with a deployed mommy or a daddy who just can't handle the deployments. So what happens is these troops that were deployed come home, whether or not they saw combat doesn't matter. They're still being forced to take a subjective questionnaire, psychiatric questionnaire, and based off of the results are getting told to do these drugs. And when they take the drugs, they become somebody that's different than what that child remembered them to be. Now that child has to deal with coping in a way that is very different than what they had to deal with when the parent was initially home. That child can't handle it. So what happens? Mom and dad says the child needs to go see somebody for help. The child goes seeks help. The child gets the same drugs that mommy and daddy's on.
Instead of dealing with the problem the right way, it's a lot easier to give a kid a pill, which ultimately destroys that young mind and ultimately erases somebody from society when that child commits suicide.
My youngest son, Daniel, was a very funny, a little prankster with lots of friends in the neighborhood. He was loved by his teachers at school.
We would go out fishing or hunting or just playing around out in the woods. So were able to spend quite a bit of time together whenever I wasn't gone on training or deployment for the Army.
Daniel began having trouble sleeping very shortly after he left, and he was worried that his dad wouldn't come home. He was worried that his dad was going to get killed. And we saw the psychiatrist for 10 or 15 minutes, and he prescribed something to help him sleep, and also Celexa.
Well, when she started telling me about the medications, I was very concerned. Overall, it seemed to me that, the situation was continuing to progress and he was just getting worse.
My husband came home from Iraq 3 months early because of my concerns.
I was very concerned at the personality change to becoming much more withdrawn and sad and depressed.
He was having some bizarre behavior. He began cutting himself at school, and he began having hallucinations.
Well, he never had any of those behaviors before being put on the drugs.
We were all here at the house. He was out of our sight for 10 or 15 minutes, and he had snuck in and went and he'd gone into his room, and I sent James to go find Daniel to help me in the yard. And he did.
What was your emergency?
We need an ambulance.
What's going on?
My little brother hung himself.
Okay. What's his name?
Daniel Raidens. My mom is performing CPR right now.
Okay, let me transfer you. Don't hang up.
He was an innocent little boy who was just worried about his dad, who prayed every night that his dad would be safe, and that his dad would come home, and that angels would protect him. But there wasn't anybody to protect my son. Psychiatry and the military took our youngest son from us and ruined our family.
Los niños son ahora un objetivo enorme para la psiquiatría. 1.900.000 niños tienen padres en el ejército y 1 millón han tenido padres movilizados. Y cuando eres un niño pequeño preocupado por mamá o papá, eso te convierte en presa fácil.
The numbers of children who have been put on drugs within the military TRICARE system is astounding. You know, it's just exploding. So it has an effect, a ripple effect on the entire family unit.
Now, today, we're finding out outpatient psychiatric treatment for children of deployed active duty service members has reached an all-time high at 2 million visits. How many drugs are these children being forced to take now?
Sea la que sea, es una cifra elevada. Según un estudio en el diario de la Academia de Psiquiatría Infantil y Juvenil, el 91% de todos los niños que visitan a un psiquiatra infantil salen con una droga psiquiátrica. ¿Es esto lo que queremos realmente para nuestros hijos? Hay que preguntarse, ¿por qué con todos estos fracasos los psiquiatras siguen dañando a la gente, drogándola, volviéndola adicta, creando violencia y suicidio? Es por la más deplorable de las razones. Los psiquiatras dicen que trastornos como el TEPT no se pueden curar. En lugar de eso afirman, tienen que manejarse con drogas para el resto de tu vida. Es mala medicina, aunque es estupenda para la cuenta bancaria.
Once you label somebody and you start medicating them, over the life of that person, it's going to cost the government about $1.5 million to provide these medications and treatment.
There's a lot of money to be made here. There's a lot of money to be made by the companies that are producing these drugs.
Profit is the only conceivable motive for all of these psychiatric drugs in the military.
Taxpayers are footing the bill for this travesty of medicine. These psychiatric drugs that promote suicides, you're paying for them.
Así que, ¿por qué los psiquiatras reparten drogas a esos niveles récord? Porque drogar a la gente es mucho más fácil que de hecho ayudarla. Y debido a esta explosión de consumo de drogas psiquiátricas, la psiquiatría ha desarrollado una relación muy íntima con las farmacéuticas. Ellos te dirán todo acerca del tema. Por desgracia, casi en cualquier lugar que mires encontrarás conflicto de intereses financieros. Por ejemplo, Matthew Friedman, psiquiatra y director del Centro Nacional de la Administración de Veteranos para el TEPT. No solo se le ha pagado como orador para 3 fabricantes de drogas, sino que también es miembro de la Junta Científica para las farmacéuticas que fabrican Paxil y Zoloft. ¿Y sabes qué? Resulta que estas son las 2 únicas drogas psiquiátricas aprobadas por el gobierno de Estados Unidos para tratar el TEPT. Luego está la doctora Elspeth Cameron Ritchie, que hasta hace poco era la psiquiatra superior en el Ejército de Estados Unidos. Elogió el antipsicótico Seroquel por ser una droga muy útil para el tratamiento de la ansiedad y las pesadillas relacionadas con el combate. Seroquel no solo no está aprobado para ese propósito, está relacionado con muertes cardíacas repentinas. Los soldados lo llaman Serokill, Suicidio. En las calles es la heroína del bebé. Ese mismo año, Ritchie promovió el uso de drogas psiquiátricas en el campo de batalla en una transmisión por internet, parcialmente financiada por el fabricante de Seroquel.
Of course, I'm a psychiatrist, so I tend to think of psychiatric medications, and we treat soldiers with medications, with cognitive behavioral therapy, and other sophisticated treatments on the battlefield.
Finalmente, está el psiquiatra y exgeneral de brigada Stephen Xenakis. Cuando estuvo en el ejército, exigía que se hicieran exámenes psiquiátricos a los soldados, cuantos más, mejor. Hoy en día, el ejército examina a sus soldados tanto como 5 veces. Un examen psiquiátrico obligatorio cuando vuelven a casa y otro como seguimiento 6 meses después. Y estos exámenes están cargados de conflictos de interés. El desarrollo de uno de estos cuestionarios recomendado por el director de Sanidad del Ejército lo financió Pfizer, el fabricante del antidepresivo Zoloft. Otro programa de tests para los soldados y sus familias lo administra un grupo al que 8 fabricantes de drogas le dan millones de dólares. Pero Xenakis quiere su propia rebanada del pastel. Está listo para ganar millones como director de una corporación que vende un escáner para el cerebro que planea usar para el diagnóstico del TEPT. En resumidas cuentas, con la psiquiatría todo es dinero. Sin duda no se trata de ayuda. Y sin reformar este sistema roto e ineficaz, el Departamento de Asuntos de los Veteranos de Estados Unidos ha contratado a otros 1.600 trabajadores de la salud mental solo para manejar los problemas que la propia profesión empeoró.
If all we're doing when we get more mental health professionals is more of the same thing, but then it's a fool's errand.
Y para el soldado que se alistó con el ideal del deber y sirvió con honor, todo se reduce a una palabra: traición.
One of the things I have the benefit of really is getting thousands of emails a week, whether it's from veterans or other people suffering from pharmaceutical damage. It's specifically veterans these days. We see an increase. We see people calling out and saying they feel betrayed.
They are very proud to serve, fight for their countries, protect, the people back home, their loved ones. And I think all they ask for is to come home and be treated fairly, given answers and looked after. And they're not looked after, they're told, it's all in your head, it's mental, take the tablets, it'll cure, go away, and that's it. And I think that is betrayal. For a word to use for those people is an understatement.
It's the deepest betrayal of a human being to kill them while claiming you're treating them, to call it medicine and deliver death.
Y todo es totalmente innecesario, porque hay esperanza y no requiere de tratamiento psiquiátrico. Miramos alrededor y por desgracia encontrarás un mundo saturado de psiquiatría. Pero hay soluciones seguras, eficaces y funcionales y pueden encontrarse.
The main word for soldiers, and not only soldiers, but anybody suffering from any type of so-called mental illness, is that there's hope. That there's hope out there, there's solutions out there, things are available for you to get your life back, to not have suicidal thoughts, to not end your life, and it does not include psychiatric drugs. There is a way to solve this. It's to get rid of the drugs and start treating soldiers like human beings, not lab rats. That's the solution.
The vets who get over their war wounds do it on their own, do it with friends, do it with colleagues, do it in support groups. They're doing it separate and distinct from the medical interventions.
If you talk to lads, when they get together, they help one another, they support one another. They are aware of fellow feeling, fellow understanding. Psychiatrists, by having the opportunity to disrupt that process by using drugs, can often disrupt it rather than support it.
A soldier does need help. He needs care and love and friendship and, whatever else is going to make him feel better personally, but he does not need psychotropic drugs.
El verdadero cuidado médico comienza con un minucioso examen físico por un médico competente para buscar cualquier daño o enfermedad subyacente que pueda estar causando aflicción emocional.
Every symptom should be investigated for physical origins, because if you don't do that, almost certainly someone who has a real physical symptom is being labeled as having a psychiatric symptom, which is false.
By making sure that we clear up any physical issues, we begin to make the soldier, the veteran, feel better. Once they begin to feel better, they feel better physically, they feel better emotionally, and they're able to deal with some of the issues relative to the traumas or the stress that they were under while in combat.
Si estás tomando drogas psiquiátricas y quieres dejarlas, asegúrate de hacerlo bajo la supervisión de un médico competente.
Getting off the drugs is one of the best things that I've done, and because it's helped me out. It helped me be back being Mike Mezin, and it really saved my life.
It's transformed my life, but at the same time, it's also made me look real hard at the damage that those drugs were doing me while I was on.
And it was that type of incident that catalyzed my resolve to aborting the system that I was in and moving forward with a non-pharmaceutical approach, which has been phenomenally successful for me. I'm not the same person.
Pero hay todavía muchos soldados ahora mismo que corren el riesgo de que se les ordene que tomen drogas psiquiátricas. Por eso es vitalmente importante que conozcas tus derechos.
There is an obligation for the service to take care of our sons and daughters that are sacrificing themselves and giving an oath to defend the Constitution with their life. I mean, that's a big deal. The command may say you have to go to see a psychiatrist because we believe you to be unstable. So does he have to show up for the appointment? The answer is yes. However, once you go into that therapist's office, you are not required to participate in that treatment. So on occasion, I have people that call me and ask me, can I refuse this or can I refuse that? And I say, absolutely.
Bajo este derecho a negarse está el más importante de todos los derechos, el consentimiento a ser informado. Consentimiento a ser informado significa que tienes el derecho a que se te informe de antemano de todos los riesgos y beneficios del tratamiento psiquiátrico, cualquier tratamiento alternativo y la opción de ningún tratamiento.
Do active duty and military have a right to informed consent? Absolutely. But these soldiers, sailors, Marines are not informed as to all of the consequences of these medications, because if you were truly informed as to the consequences of taking these drugs, would you really take them? And the answer is most likely no.
Consentimiento a ser informado es solo uno de los muchos derechos que tienes bajo el Código Militar de Estados Unidos. Muchos otros países también ofrecen los derechos de consentimiento a ser informado, pero eres tú quien debe exigirlo. Participa y háblale a los demás de estos derechos. Muchos valientes sobrevivientes a la psiquiatría militar y sus familias están denunciándolo ahora, y tú podrías ayudarles.
I don't want another family to experience what we've experienced. Unfortunately, that's happening.
This is an outrage. What's going on here? Are these young people just guinea pigs? Apparently so. My daughter was a guinea pig. And she's gone.
One of Tony's last things, he always told me, just keep speaking up, Mom. Even if you only help one person, just keep speaking up.
My goal is not just to tell Anthony's story, but I feel it's a story that's not unique. It's something that's happening to so many of our troops.
As an advocate for my son and an advocate for wounded veterans across the country, our group that I work with, we're trying to make a change in that direction.
So we made it our mission that we're gonna tell everybody we can and have the website have as much information that we can.
We've got to get the word out to our soldiers. Don't take these drugs. Don't take these drugs. It's the beginning of the end.
Se necesita una acción inmediata no solo en Estados Unidos, sino en todo el mundo. Más soldados y veteranos británicos cometieron suicidio en el 2012 que los que murieron en combate. Lo mismo con el pequeño ejército australiano durante la pasada década. El 20% de las muertes entre los soldados alemanes en el extranjero es por suicidio, y el ejército ruso tiene un promedio de un 65%, que es más alto que el resto del país entero.
So, what is the solution? Get rid of psychiatry and mental health. Don't leave them in charge.
Mental health will not improve until psychiatrists are no longer in charge of it.
I truly believe that they are destroying our military.
The battlefield is safer than psychiatry. Do you understand that? Statistically, you are less likely to be shot by an enemy than to be killed by a pharmaceutical drug. That's the truth about psychiatry.
Y aún así, la influencia de la psiquiatría va más allá del ejército. Es como J.R. Rees lo planeó. El tratamiento psiquiátrico experimentado y desarrollado en el ejército, esparciéndose por cada resquicio y rincón de la vida civil. La psiquiatría es en la actualidad una industria internacional que genera $330 mil millones al año. Prometió ayudar. Entrega dolor, daño y muerte. El enemigo oculto ha sido revelado. Lo que ocurra ahora depende de todos nosotros. Tienes los hechos. Defiéndete.